Welcome to the Lost Signals Reviews, the American Film Institute's Top 100, where we critique the supposed 100 greatest American movies of all time. Join us as we decide if they're worthy of the Mott's Top 100.
Or Mott's. Hello, I am Dr. Jonathan Ian Manser, and I would like to welcome you to group today. For the benefit of my patients, we are discussing the number 33 on the AFI Top 100, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I'd like to introduce you to Christopher Morgan.
All I wanted was a Pepsi, and she wouldn't give it to me.
Stephen Ramosi.
Just one Pepsi.
And Scott Thurlow.
I'm not crazy. Your other one is crazy.
As you can see, there are a lot of issues that must be resolved. But we'll begin with our funny log line with Scott.
Yeah, so we've gone with all play and no work makes Mac a lobotomized boy, sadly.
Poor Mac.
And Mr. Mosi, would you like to concisely tell our viewers about this movie?
Sure. R.P. McMurphy, Jack Nicholson's character, starts off the movie coming into an institution from prison. We kind of find out who he is through interviews with his doctor and his interactions with the other patients in the ward, as he kind of gains a begrudging, at first, friendship with all these guys who are in the ward with him, and is set up against the head nurse. What's her name?
Nurse Ratched.
Ratched. Yeah, Nurse Ratched on the ward. And it's kind of a lot of him just gaining everybody's trust and trying to break out throughout the movie, and trying to annoy the shit out of Nurse Ratched as much as he can.
Well, he sort of rallies sort of the despondent group of inmates.
Yeah.
To sort of teach them about embracing life and being more free-spirited, more or less. Before you go on, it's sort of implied he's faking this illness.
Oh, it absolutely is, because
Right.
when initially he's there to escape work camp.
Yeah, exactly.
And then when he finds out that he can be held indefinitely is when everything switches about him attempting to break out.
Yeah.
It turns out life of leisure in the paradise of whatever mental institution they're in wasn't up to his...
Isn't quite what it seems.
Exactly.
He heard they had a pool.
Sure, it's not quite what it's cracked up to be.
They do at some point.
they are.
They do at some point all break out and go fishing on a little pleasure cruise, if you will, which was
it's a bonding
fun little scene.
Field trip. Yeah.
And it kind of comes to a head when, as you said, after he realizes that he can be held there even after his prison sentence is up, and he decides he needs to break out, starts making plans towards that. There's a scene where he's attempting to break out, and then everybody falls asleep for some reason.
No, they have a drunken party.
Yeah, but I feel like if I was drunk and I was trying to break out of a place, I could
all right,
hold it together.
But
anyway, that's neither here nor there.
But it is here or there, and we're going to discuss this right now, because you need to confront your issues with this. I think that because he was a ne'er-do-well his entire life, he actually found something worth fighting for here, and he was, for once in his life, it's implied, none of this is explicit, which is what I like about this film, it's implied that he's a leader of men in the first time in his life.
Yeah, he sort of found a purpose to a degree.
And I think that he didn't actually, he wants to escape because that's his nature, but at the same time, he wants to remain with his people.
Yeah, he certainly wanted to. The reason that he doesn't leave is because he certainly wanted to at least get his friends, have his friends have a good time, which is why he throws his party before he leaves, and which is why he sets up Billy with his girlfriend and Candy, who has a very minimal part in this, other than being the reason
literal
everybody
Candy,
gets screwed
almost,
over,
if you will.
Yeah, but and then the next morning, after they all are woken by the people coming into work the next morning and found out Billy is driven to kill himself, which causes Jack Nicholson to go nuts and try to murder Nurse Ratched. And then he is lobotomized and the chief escapes. So that's a very small slice of what happens in this movie, but I think fairly concise.
I love the scene with Billy towards the end because, again, a lot of what art is afflicting these gentlemen is implied beyond just what you see in there. But I would like to have seen the control and the damage that the mother had done to Billy.
Yeah.
Because, like, he partly has a stutter, I think, because of what his home life there.
Oh, for sure.
But they're talking about a girl he had like a crush on, and that he didn't let his mother know because like he wouldn't approve. And then when he finally loses his virginity to Candy, Ratchet's like, "I'm gonna tell your mother," and till he commits suicide rather than having his mother. It's almost a Norman Bates type thing, but a more tragic version of that.
The thing is, the one thing I didn't remember from last time is because he stands up to Ratchet, and then Ratchet mentions his mom, and then immediately starts
falls apart.
You noticed that, yeah.
Immediately starts stuttering again.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
It's a subtle touch.
it was just the control, the layers of control that are going on here.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know, it's just she knows how to push everybody's buttons, and like even when they were trying to decide what to do with McMurphy, she was just kind of sitting there silent, and she's like, "No, he should stay here." It's just like she definitely knows where everybody's buttons are.
Total fascist.
Yeah,
Sure, which we'll get to. But no, like, you're right. That's the general overview of the plot. And there's a lot of subtleties, as you mentioned, E, to this movie, which I think we'll tease out as we go along. But if we're going to go to scores, I was somewhat debating, like, in my mind, whether to give it a pretty solid 3 or a super strong 2. I'm still kind of on the fence. So if you guys, I'll open it up with that. What do you guys think about score-wise, narratively?
Well, I think the arc of Mac is very strong.
Yes, I agree.
And even though and we're going to talk about the supporting cast later, but Jack Nicholson has to carry the weight of this movie, and he succeeds at that. And
For sure.
from being selfish to
Being self-serving, we'll say, yeah.
to slowly starting to like the people around him and sacrifice for them, to being finding out he's trapped, to sacrificing himself for the others. And I think his arc is fascinating to watch, and that's why I think that alone deserves a 3 to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Strong opening argument.
I
What do you guys think?
pretty much agree with that. I mean, that's a little bit of that can go into protagonist for sure as well, but the story arc of this is so like satisfying in that you see him come in as somebody who, it's fairly obvious he's faking his
It's all but
mental
set
illness
out right, sure.
in order to get out of work detail. And coming to know these guys, there's a scene where he's like, "What do you guys think? You're crazy?" And he's like, "You're not any crazier than like everybody else walking around." And like really
True.
comes to see them
He does
as
say
like
that.
peers and like fellow men, And I kind of like love that camaraderie that comes about in a shitty place like that. So yeah, I'm gonna give it a pretty strong 3.
What do you think, Chris?
I'm going to give it a very strong 3 because breaking it down, there is, and we'll probably get to this more themes, but really this is so character driven. You were right about Mac, but watching the character development of even all the other patients, and it's character wise, it's a really, really strong movie. It's got a solid foundation for a story. And I think it's a very, 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 very bittersweet movie. I don't find it depressing. I couldn't remember going into this, watching it again, if it was depressing or not. And I'm like, no, it's bittersweet. It's sad, but it's
got its moments.
Yeah, so...
I just want to build off that. Mac's arc wouldn't work unless you believed in the effect he was having on people. And that's why the supporting cast is so important here, because it's not just told to you, you witness the growth of the people around him.
Yeah.
No, I think you guys convinced me. Like I said, my instinct was to give it a 3, and based on everything you said, that yeah, he has a full arc, grows and changes as a character, and sort of like, I hesitate to say drags along the other characters, but certainly they grow and learn something from him as well. I think, and all together, they have a shared experience, which somewhat betters them to some degree. And yes, you're right, it's a tragic ending, but I still think as well there's sort of a hope beyond that.
It's true, because he becomes a legendary figure at the end of this.
Exactly, and Chief does escape, like sort of inspires Chief to finally get out of it.
And they're even, I was gonna say, they're even telling like myths about him at the end of the movie. It's like, oh,
Mac
I heard
escaped.
McMurphy. I heard Mac escaped. Like, you know,
It's basically the plot of The Dark Knight, if you think about it.
Well, I didn't think about it that way, but regardless, I do think you guys...
he kills him, so the legend
right.
Fair enough. But I do think it's a very strong, like, complete narrative with strong elements throughout, which we'll get into soon. So I will give it a 3 as well.
And one thing I noticed was that throughout it, everybody's taking baby steps to stand up to Ratchet, because
Sure, like he sort of rallies them, inspires them, and then they gain their own confidence as well.
Yeah, I was like thinking about how everybody raising, at what point everybody raises their hands, and so it seems to me that Billy was the ultimate expression. Like, you know, I mean, I was thinking in terms of character development that everybody throughout it takes baby steps to stand up, and
Sure.
Yeah,
I think it's a damn strong narrative and enough for a 3 on our scale.
Okay, Mr. Morgan, tell me about your mother or themes.
Or both.
Well, there's well, I'll tell you about themes.
Thank Christ.
Go on. No good deed goes unpunished. No. There. I mean, no. It's the God. Where do I start? Themes. There's just generosity. There's sacrifice. I'm like thinking of everything we said. I'm trying to encapsulate it eloquently, and I'm having a hard time doing it. But it's showing that the capacity for human good. That, like, you may start. Mac seemed like he was starting off like he was there for his own purposes, and he wanted to see the baseball game. But he started really liking these people, and self-serving turned to generosity. There was it's weird because he and Chief seem to be the most. Everybody else's involvement, everybody else's giving or taking to it hinged upon Mac, and Chief was kind of like his silent ally in it. So I'd really have to say thematically, it's kind of like layers of support. It's kind of, there is a little bit of a microcosm of society here, and I can't really put a name to everybody's description, but that's what I got out of it.
Okay.
Well, I wouldn't think so. This might be darker, but I mean, it's the one that I thought, like, it's that the institutional system will crush the spirit of humanity. Like, I don't know what to say. I'm not saying it's the only one, but that's sort of what happens to Mac. Granted, yes, he inspires and sort of betters his fellow, like, inmates, asylum members feel, and, like, yes, they become more comrades, if you will. They build a friendship and a trust with each other. And so therefore he becomes, like you said, sort of a legendary character, like, to them, like, oh, Mac was, like, he taught us something, like, we can be better, we can get more confidence, we can do more things, right? So, like, while that's there, yeah, he is beat down and defeated in the end, but his like, what he taught them does live on, and as exemplified by Chief gaining the confidence and the will to escape, and which that was the final shot of the film at the end as well, which is something that the film was building throughout their friendship, and them trying to, like, make it a plan, like, oh yeah, you'll meet Chief, we'll make it, we'll Canada, like, we'll live free, we'll do our own thing. So, like, while, yes, the system crushed him and was crushing them before he arrived, and slowly it sort of rallied them again into, like, a crew, like, again, a circle of close friends. So I just thought that was, like, certainly contained. And, like, I don't know how deeply you want to go into, like, the nature or
I do.
Wait, but to the society, the system, Chief, when he decided he wasn't going to go because the system, because he is a Native American, and one of the things is they were kept down, and a lot of them turned to alcohol, and he said the system beat his father through the alcohol. So that's really, I mean, there's that layer of, it's not just the institution within, it's the institution without.
I'll toss it to Ian in a sec, but I certainly think, like, you know, how these people in our society are suffering from some mental, like, illness or something to some degree or another, are treated and sort of boxed away, you know, ostracized from society. And maybe it's better now, but I don't know how much better it actually is. So,
all right. So this is following in the footsteps of, like, the Rogue with the Heart of Gold that was big in this time period.
Yeah.
So, like, we can go back about the Easy Rider, which we saw.
I knew you were going to say that because I was going to say it too.
Yeah, where it's people rebelling against authority, and Nurse Ratched is the callous authority. There's other authority figures which are at least more open, but that system is they're trying to.
She embodies it. Yeah.
She embodies the worst parts of that system and the controlling parts of the system. That's funniest. The problem is, Mac isn't a hero. He's a violent thug in a lot of ways. He would rather get into a fist fight than work out his problems. And I've been through the mental health institutions. A lot of these people, some of them are choosing the right. Chief chose to stay there. I forget the guy, the gay professor.
Cheswick and Harding.
No, Cheswick, I think, is actually problems. It's an attempt to delegitimize psychiatry here. And I have a big problem with that because I think it does help a lot of people. And sometimes the Nurse Ratched exists, but to blanket and say that if everyone just lived happy and free and could do whatever they want, there's nothing as such as insanity. All it is misunderstood people. And I think it's not a good message.
I'm not thinking it's a simple, like, issue or anything like that.
But I think it's not a simple issue, and they're making it a simple issue in this.
Actually, I was going to say, considering the thing took place in 1962, I actually took it as a call for mental health reform, because if you look at it, Mac has this. Mac, hold on a second. Mac has what you were saying, but he's wrong about it. It's just like, this is a place of extremes. And nobody's getting the care they need because Ratchet's about control, and Mac's the other side of it. He's about.
But they're offering no alternative on their end. He would have killed Nurse Ratched if he wasn't stopped.
Yeah.
And sorry he got lobotomized. I'm sorry that he's a protagonist, is very likable, but I understand why they did what they did.
Oh, absolutely.
They lobotomized him?
Well, I don't agree with lobotomization. I don't think that's ever or electric shock. I don't agree with. But
you're saying it seems like the film tried to portray like an easy, like it's a dichotomy, A and B.
So it was swinging the pendulum all to the other side.
So I haven't said anything yet about themes, but, like, that actually goes right into exactly what I wanted to say. Is, like, I think a lot of the biggest theme of this is, and I assume this is after this happened, but, like, around, I think in the 60s, there was some journalist went into a, I wish I remembered more about this, but, like, some journalist went into a mental institution, like, I think it was a woman, checked herself in and, like, did this whole expose on how fucked up it was, and, like, electric shock therapy, all this type of stuff being used. And I think the point of this movie is not to necessarily say, here's what needs to be done. It's to say, like, look at what we're doing to people in places like this right now.
Killing,
and, like,
all the free spirits.
It's tough because, God, Steve,
cutting out their brains, and, like, that. I think that's a lot of what it is like, you have people running mental health institutions, and I think this still happens today.
Certainly it's an issue.
And like, I haven't had that experience. As you said, you've been in places like this before, so you know more about it from an insider's perspective than I do, of course. But you know, you can read stories about how like people are being treated like shit, and like people still believe that electroshock therapy is something we should be doing to people, or like, you know, basically that we should be changing people by changing their brains instead of trying to work with the people that they are.
Sometimes it's to me it's an argument, and I guess we're gonna go real off topic here for a second. An argument of like, I have a heart problem. You should take this like heart medication.
I chose a poor choice of
No, I'm not going to take the medication. I'm going to believe that I'm a good person and have happiness.
Sure.
No, sometimes you gotta take medication.
Yeah,
you absolutely do, and that is you.
It's definitely valid.
The thing is, I think what this film points out is that a lot of times the ways that were used to treat patients were for the betterment of the people that were working at the places, not for the betterment of the patients themselves.
They were,
which, if you're taking medicine that your doctor and you have figured out is, you know, working, is for the betterment of the patient. Like, I think that's basically what they were trying to point out.
well,
I just, for the record, I take lithium for bipolar disorder. Saved my life. So that's where I'm coming from.
Completely, yeah. I don't disagree with medicine being a very important thing.
There's people who complain that like there's over medication and all that. I don't think you'll ever come to a situation where everyone is going to be happy with whatever situation there is.
No.
Well, in this film, I got it like this is because the attitudes towards mental health, and as I was saying about mental health reform, have changed, and they still have a way to go because I'm taking Lamictal for bipolar disorder, you know, for bipolar. I'm a rapid cycler. I've always been lucky enough to hold down a job. But my mom's a psych nurse, and my psychiatrist used to work.
Told me about your mother.
I did tell you about my
Did
mother.
ask him.
But
on yourself.
But I know nowadays, like you see these commercial ads, and you see this person looking longingly at a window. It says, I suffer from bipolar depression. It says actor portrayal. It makes me want to fucking punch a TV because, because I know it's much more. It's more. I mean, how many cocktails did you have to go through before they found the right thing? Mm-hmm. I mean, I've been on like
trichloroporazine. Terrible.
The SSRIs. I'm like basically allergic to all of them, and it took a couple of times to find the right psychiatrist. Unfortunately, was one that my mom worked with, and he was somebody who got his hands dirty. Like when something would happen, all the doctors would be like, "Oh, call the nurses, call the orderlies." He would get down. What I'm saying is, I kind of saw this
lobotomization.
Could have been prescribed for you.
But that's one of the reasons that maybe from my perspective now, because when I first saw it, I was still in the process of trying to figure out that I didn't even know I was bipolar at the time. But that's why it didn't click then. But when I watch this now, and we're talking about it, it seemed to me like this back in 1962, you didn't know what to do with people like them, like us.
Now we just throw them in prison.
Yeah, now we throw them in prison, but you know, you throw them in institutions. I mean, and that's why I took this as a need for.
My final thought, and with zero, is either it had no effect whatsoever, or it was giving a bad message, so I'm giving you a 0.
I don't know. Like all that's very like valid. Like yeah, it's some heavy stuff. But to me, I thought the message was something like there were things that need to be done to reform the system. Now, whether or not those things like you can debate like the nuances of them, but it just wasn't working. And that's probably true to this day, as we just said. It's not a perfect system. Sure, there's been improvements, but there still has to be a balance between them. And for me, that's what I got the film's message. Like, listen, if we just were more sympathetic and not just try to beat the people who fall in this category down, that I thought was the message to me, and that's why I'm going to give it a 1. And clearly there's room to debate, as we just had, but
yeah,
for my final score, I think that's what I got out, and that's why I think, to me, was reflected in the film.
That's why I'm leaning towards you, because I think it was more of an exam. I did take it more of a this needs reform, and what it does show you is that Mac may not have had altruistic impulses prior to it, but it did show you that if you pay attention to people, that No. I'm just saying that if you take it from a mental health reform place, you take the message as if you actually take. Because how many people there actually belong there? Like when they were talking,
All of them.
They all check. Well, most of them checked themselves.
Many were voluntary, as the film points out.
Other than like 3 of them, including Mac.
I don't know. Like I said, I'm kind of coming on Scott's side of it because I did to kind of take it as an examination for mental health reform.
What do you think, Steve?
So I am going to give this a 1 as well, based on the fact that it is obviously a very hot topic of
still
conversation,
a big issue,
still today,
Sure.
and I'm sure was talking about something that was not discussed very much at the time, and still isn't discussed as openly as it should be today. And this movie kind of took all the things, put the biggest actors, some of the biggest actors, well, at least
what would be
almost none of the big actors because no one wanted to touch it.
They weren't in it yet, but it was Danny DeVito, Christopher Lloyd in his first role,
Sure.
but Jack Nicholson,
The most believable people to be in a mental institution.
sure. Later to be on Taxi together.
Oh, that's right. They were both on Taxi.
We still have some levity.
And
to this.
yeah, I mean, I think that it talked about something that was important to be talked about, and I don't think that it was as damaging to the view of what a mental institution should be as you think.
I think it also promoted snowflake culture. Of
Yes, all
modern
those SJWs.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, all I'm saying is the fact that we're having this conversation as in depth, and I guess we can agree that at least the film had something to say. Now, whether or not they achieved it, but it's an important conversation to have, and this film sort of stirred that. But I would imagine both back then and is stirring it now. So to me, that's why I think I'm giving it credit on themes. Depending on how effectively addressed it's still addressing an important topic that's relevant, I think, in society still.
Okay, well, I'm moving on to antagonists.
Okay.
Go for it.
Nurse Ratchet, who plays the order to Max Chaos. And in here, Order is the villain. Her need for control, her need to have a perfectly regimented society for the betterment of everyone, or in her mind, for the betterment
Even
of everyone.
to their actual detriment.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think she's an incredibly effective protagonist, especially since she wins in a way. Less so in the novel, from what I've read about it.
I've never read the original novel, but it seems. I think you said it was the case that you looked it up.
From what I understand, it's yes, the same ending happens, except that almost everyone either checks out or moves to different wards. So she loses the world she built.
Or stranglehold upon them. Yeah.
Just to start again with a new group of people. So again, yeah, that's my thoughts on it.
You're right. I think is effective. Like as we said, she embodies sort of like the system's preference to beat people down and like sort of pigeonhole them and peg them down. And again, you can go into that as further as you want. But certainly within the film, I think she was an effective antagonist. She certainly was against them. And when Mac arrives, like then the dynamic is truly set up. Where, like I said, I like the order versus chaos thing. That I think they're like a yin yang, like two sides of the same coin on that.
To be fair, though, regimentation is very good for
Can be
certain
helpful,
people.
yes. Sure.
And a lot of inpatient programs offer that for individuals. Again, Ratchet's it is even done cartoonishly. She's very believable.
Yeah, she's sort of by the book, and like this is what says, this is what the prescribed thing is, so we're going to do that and never change it. But I'm just saying, it doesn't seem to be improving their lives all that much.
Yeah, but in reality,
Sure.
And that's what makes it really good, is because it's such a believable villain, and you can, again, it's almost like I can see what you're trying to do. I just think you take it a little too far, and that makes him a more sympathetic villain.
Well, she's got a lot of layers to her, because when we first meet her, she's disarming, and then it's just like
she seems like he's truly trying to help.
Well, yeah,
and maybe she thinks she is, but
she does have that regiment. She says, "Hey, there's this regiment," and it's perfectly logical, and you understand. And then as the layers unfold, you realize that she has all this, but she's taken it to the extreme. Like and what makes her an effective protagonist is she's not 100.
Well, she's not the protagonist.
Antagonist. But I think you said it that she's not wrong on a lot of things.
Mhm.
It's
There's a lot of gray area, but certainly within the narrative, she is set up as such, and I think she does a good job filling that role.
Yeah, I mean, completely agreed. She is. She is the. She goes way over the top, and like, even perhaps as somebody mentioned, even perhaps believes that she is doing the right thing. But I think when her methods are kind of laid bare, it's pretty obvious that she's being selfish in terms of what she's doing. She's doing it because she thinks it's the only way. Her way is the only way, as opposed to doing what's best for her patients. She's doing what she wants to do, and because she wants to be right about her methods.
Yeah, but I think that, in a way, she thinks that's what's doing best for her patients. Like, I don't think she can even see outside that.
Exactly.
Like,
And that's
I
kind
think
of
the
maybe
one
part of the
scene
problem,
where when Billy kills himself, I think is when that really lays her faults at bare, is that
Yeah.
she can't even rationalize that she had anything to do with
Right.
his death.
Can't
Exactly.
see that it's her
Although we
fault.
don't actually know that, because she's immediately attacked by Mac. So,
But no, like, because it's such a great area, like in regard to themes and also to her, like, to an extent. But certainly, I think she fills the antagonist role quite well because of the dynamic of the conflict, as you mentioned, the setup of that.
Yeah.
So I'm giving it a 1.
I agree. I'm going to give it a 1.
okay, Scott, please tell us about Mac.
All right, R.P. McMurphy, man. Yeah, so as played by Jack Nicholson, and like again, the joke that we keep referencing is that he's an institution. This is well before, or at least a couple of years before The Shining. But no, man, he's charismatic. Like you said, he plays like sort of a small time criminal thug. I think they mentioned he's had a couple of assaults on his record.
he's a pedophile too, or statutory
Well,
yeah.
rapist. Not a pedophile, but he's statutory rape.
15-year-olds,
Yeah.
dude.
Yeah.
I mean, 15-year-olds.
He does try to defend it. To be fair, so like yeah, he's sort of like maybe like kind of a low grade creep, but like at the end of the day,
I mean,
he's
a fucking scumbag, all right?
He's a
Can we
scumbag,
just agree he's a
totally,
fucking
yeah.
scumbag?
But he's one
Can we just say it
charismatic
out loud?
scumbag.
Yeah,
Sure.
He's a great character who's
but
a fucking scumbag.
you definitely get more facets to him, and like we said, because we gave narrative a 3, plot 3, because you can see him grow and change as a character. Like he becomes less of a scumbag at least, like throughout, and learns something, and like it has some connection to his fellow asylum mates.
I mean, his last action before getting lobotomized is attempted murder.
Right.
Yeah.
Because he snapped because one of the friends he became,
I
close with.
understand why he did it. It's a crime of
understand.
passion, but it's
I'm
still
just
a crime.
saying, it's the chaos versus the order thing. But I certainly think he's a very well done and well rounded protagonist. And it's a very good portrayal, of course. An early role from Jack Nicholson. And yeah, like he might not be sympathetic, like you said. He's definitely not a hero, more of a rogue anti-hero, more or less. But still, he does try to enact some positivity in these people's lives once he gets to know them a bit more. Even though he's a bit, antagonistic with them, there's some animosity there, or he feels like he's the smartest man, like in the room, which sometimes he is and sometimes he isn't. But nevertheless, I think it's a very fully three-dimensional character, and both in terms of script and then, like I said, the acting. So I have to give him a pretty strong 1. And I like to follow along with his journey, even though it was, as Chris said, pretty bittersweet at the end, at least all said and done. But I think he's a pretty damn good character, and I'm giving him a 1.
I will say I think he is sympathetic. I don't know. I wouldn't say he's not sympathetic.
There were
Doesn't
moments of it. I
Doesn't
guess.
mean he's not a fucking scumbag.
Sure.
But I love this character as the protagonist because he's a very flawed protagonist.
Yep.
He's great.
point.
It's a great story to follow. I don't want to be fucking friends with him necessarily.
He's a
Although
scumbag.
I might. Who knows?
If I was in the asylum, I'd be like,
Yeah.
"Hey, Mac is the man,"
Yeah.
He's a scumbag with the heart of gold.
Yeah,
But-
yeah, I like that.
I don't know if he has a heart of gold either, but like he's he gains appreciation for his fellow inmates or his fellow
Asylum
Yeah.
members.
asylum goers, and he is a super complex character who has a really great character arc, and for that, like, I have to give it full
Yeah.
credit.
Well said.
It's a really well done throughout the course of this movie.
See, I just want to have one thing to say. I don't find him sympathetic because I never actually really held. I held sympathy for other people and things, but he is likable, and that's what
That's
I think
true.
is the difference
It's a bit
that I
of a
hold to it.
difference.
Like, I'm rooting for him, but I'm like
he's
if
still
he
kind
fell,
of a
I'd be like,
dickbag.
yeah, it's like
Yeah.
kind of.
Do you know what's funny though? I'm rooting for him. I was rooting for him insofar as his relation to other people, insofar as his relationship to Chief and the other
I had
guys.
sympathy for Chief.
Oh, I did too. But what I'm saying is, Mac by himself would have been Mac.
Which we'll get to in a second. for
Mac's sympathy relies on everybody else. It's not him. It's him in relation to it. It's everybody else. So,
sure. No, I see what you mean. I see what you're getting at.
I mean, I'm still giving him a 1 because
Sure.
he's great. But what I'm saying is, he is likable or charismatic, but he is a lot of the bittersweet for me comes.
Because he's likely a sociopath.
Yeah, well, without question.
And I like
Without
sociopaths.
question.
Okay.
But anyway, I think it's ones all.
Yep.
Pretty strong ones for
yeah.
him.
Stevens, back to you with
Supporting, I believe.
Supporting.
Speaking of Chief.
All right. So I'll take a couple of these. I know there are a ton of supporting characters who are mostly pretty damn good in this movie. So I'm going to mention the two that everyone else wants to mention first.
Go for it.
Danny DeVito plays Martini, and
Hit me.
and he is. It's very strange seeing Danny DeVito with like
With hair?
most of a head of hair
Is that how you-
and like looking like he's probably 30 years old or whatever the hell he was when he was in this role. It's, I can't imagine him not like as Frank from the Always Sunny anymore.
The same guy can do 2 shows in 30 fucking years, man. But
Go
anyway.
back and watch Throw Mama from the Train at some point. But like, and then there's Christopher Lloyd plays Tabor. Also does a great job. Apparently, it was Christopher Lloyd's first role,
Yep.
long before he was Doc from Back to the Future. And by long, I mean what, like 12 years or something like that.
Well, he definitely stole a lot
10.
of scenes.
Yeah,
For sure.
A great,
He's a commanding presence.
a
Yeah.
great acting debut
Yeah.
for somebody who had never been there before, and like he just, he's Christopher Lloyd has something, especially like in this movie, he had something that like really grabbed the attention from everybody else that was in the scene, because he was in scenes with a lot of people usually, and yeah. So the two of them were pretty great. I liked seeing them and Jack Nicholson kind of like smash the scene like back and forth to each other,
Yeah.
like throughout as they were all working on it. But yeah, I'll leave off with the two of them.
I was going to say something, but I'm going to save it for style.
All right.
So
Okay, well, let me jump in. Yeah, because as mentioned, Steve-O, there's probably like 7 or 8 like of the core group that he becomes friends with. So it's a pretty big supporting cast for sure. But I think perhaps the most important narratively wise is Chief, because he's sort of like it's the connection between them. Like he seems like everyone tells Jack Nicholson McMurphy that he's deaf and dumb, so don't bother. But he tries. He's sort of the first one. Chief that is that McMurphy tries to befriend, or like he's like, hey, let's play some basketball, like just hold your hands up. Or he sort of like grows, connects with him first to a degree, and of course reveal that Chief is neither deaf nor dumb. He's just sort of faking it, and like they have an actual relationship, and like I said, they enact a plan, or at least agree to try to escape. So I think he serves like a really like a conduit role, if you will.
he's in a weird way the redemption of Matt.
Exactly.
And even
that's why I
when
think
he was
he's
lobotomized, he redeems him by killing him.
that's why I think he's most important, like pertinent character narratively. But certainly, like there are other ones too, like Harding and like the older Dr. Scanlon. Like they all serve their role. The ones you said, Steve, were sort of more noticeable because they're the most famous actors that went on to become big after this movie. But I'm just saying, like they all have a nice like each of one has, of course, their flaws and their sort of like ups and downs that Max sort of connects to varying degrees throughout. So I think it's a really damn solid supporting cast, given the fact that the narrative has to juggle so many of them at once, pretty much, and like show like little moments and snippets of their relationships to each other and to Mac throughout, and how that grows and changes. Like for example, the field trip, the fishing thing was like a pretty important scene, where he sort of takes them like, hey, I'm sort of unofficially your leader now because of this, and again like gives them all to some degree confidence. I think Billy is the second most important one, right? Because of you mentioned like he's the youngest one there. He's a young kid, and he had some problems, and like whatever was happening. Tell me about your mother, Billy, like as you mentioned, right? And then of course like his suicide at the end is what sets Mac off on like it's sort of an irrational attack upon Ratchet, and that seals his fate. So I'm just saying like they're all damn well done, and like they serve their role very, very well within the narrative and the plot.
Sorry. if
I'm
three
done.
people want to talk about quickly.
Okay.
Cheswick was his.
Yep.
His name?
Yeah.
He also
Never forgot about
again, he is the first one to actually stand up to Nurse Ratched about the cigarettes.
Right.
And it shows inspiration.
No, actually, he votes with Mac about the baseball thing, if you remember.
Yes.
That happened
So,
first, yeah.
The growth of his character is really the impetus towards him actually becoming leader. But Scatman Crothers.
Yeah.
Scatman
I was leaving that for what
Crothers.
Scatman Carruthers, man.
he's got the shining, man. And
So
also,
good.
he likes to party hard.
He does. And I got to all the trailer park floozies out there.
Sorry about how shitty your part was in this.
Sorry about your portrayal in One Flew Over.
Go watch
No,
another movie.
I'm giving it a 1 if it wasn't clear to
All right.
supporting.
Well, I was going to say, we were talking about Chief before. I like the fact that Mac just tries to go for the throat and immediately try to insult him with the to try to get him to break to see if he really
to
was.
get a rise out of
Mac-
him.
Yeah,
to
he
go for
went
the
over
throat.
there, ooh, and it's like, so I know, but what I'm saying is I found that funny that he went for the attack and he's like, okay, he must be deaf and dumb. And that's when he started to, take him under his wing. I just remembered that when you were talking about Chief. But I'm going to say one of the things I found interesting was, the institutionalization, the whole process, because you had Spivey,
Dr. Spivey, yeah.
Spivey, but basically it was Nurse Ratched. So you'd come back to this board, and these people that were basically disassociated from basically what I was saying before. These guys didn't get their hands dirty, but they made judgments.
Mhm.
And Spivey kind of did, but Ratched was the one. So there's these layers of disassociation between the board and the people, and the major link is Spivey and Ratched. So I mean, I think just even for people that are just far out of the loop, with that aren't are people in the ward, I think they even serve a very, very, very important
Sure, like the
purpose.
staff and the supporting.
A number of the
Institutions.
COs,
Yeah.
for lack of a better term.
Yeah,
Mm.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, like I said, this movie has a pretty big supporting cast, like almost layers of them. But I think they all serve the role and do a damn good job within, especially given the ones that we just said.
Okay, Chris. Dialogue.
I thought the dialogue was great. It's one of those things where, there are a couple of little lines that do get pulled out from here, but I thought it was great. I thought it was natural. I thought the delivery was great. I thought it kind of held that balance between being natural and being a little over the top at the same time, but
Yeah,
it never
I feel you.
went. But it never went too far over the top. I mean, it was. I'm looking for the word, not extreme, but
Extreme.
It's extreme.
Not
No,
the opposite of that.
no. But
Subdued.
no, but
Subtle.
the because of the performances, the dialogue could have been more over the top, and I think they reined a lot of it in.
Sure, they showed some restraint, we'll say.
Yeah, I think a lot of it they put into the actors, but again, for me personally, dialogue, you really have to fuck up dialogue to get a 0 from me, and I think I thought whether even if it was Mac being disgusting about a 15-year-old girl, it's just like I said, it's just even when they were being horrible, the descriptive nature of what they were talking about, the words on the page were good, and you needed this cast to bring them to life in a way that wasn't that served it well. So I'm giving it a 1.
It was a very believable ward.
Fuck. Yeah, like, I've used the word believability a lot in dialogue, and I think this one's no exception. And yeah, you're right, Chris. There are like maybe moments here and there when it gets like approaching over the top, but never quite crosses that line. And otherwise, yeah, it was very, again, natural and organic. And you saw like when Mac arrives, like, again, he's sort of set against them. He's like, look at all these loonies. And then he's like, well, we're all loonies and we're no more crazier than anybody else, really. So yeah, I bought into it a lot. And yeah, the performances went a long way. But I thought the script itself, specifically the dialogue, was fucking solid as hell throughout. So I'm going to give it a solid 1 probably. I can't pick out anything specific, but certainly there's nothing cringeworthy or stilted to me about it.
Well, even if it approached cringeworthy,
It
some
was
of
on
those scenes,
purpose.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I really love the dialogue in this movie. One of my favorite scenes that I'll mention for this part is almost a monologue, but it's the scene where they're not allowed to watch the World Series game, and he starts like announcing it as though he's the announcer.
That was I like that scene a lot
I absolutely love that scene, and if for no other reason, like just his dialogue in that part was amazing, and I gotta give it credit.
You're right. I agree that that's a highlight, and for sure.
Okay. What am I on now? Oh, I think it's on to me with style.
It is.
So this is what I bring up earlier. I read an article about this movie after watching it. For a lot of the scenes, they would have a camera on the person who's speaking, and they would have a roaming camera around.
Oh, the group and stuff.
Not telling the people who they're going to film for that. So they had to be on point with their expressions, and that's credited to how all these great scenes of their reaction shots. And in fact, he added, I believe, 20 minutes into this of reactions in order, which makes it far more engaging, because it's kind of, even though it was quicker, it felt longer. Yeah. But with the reactions, it made things seem...
Please continue.
So yeah, I have to give a lot of credit for that, because this is you feel like you're there at the ward in these groups talking with this. Except I'd have to say one complaint. The trip they took to fishing, especially the shots from the bus on the outside, totally dated the movie. But beyond that,
I mean, it's sign of the times artifact, Chris.
Oh no, I was just gonna say what you were saying. Scott and I were talking about before, because you had a lot of reaction shots, you had a lot of waiting and looking out the window, and Scott and I were actually literally talking about that today, and we were talking about that's probably by design. And hearing what you had said, that yes, it was definitely by design.
I mean, I thought the opening shot was a great wide the car driving on the road up to the road leading to the asylum. But you're right, E. It's very effective at making you feel as if you're part of the group there, or you're watching everything going on, sitting next to them in the room or whatever, or when we're in the group with Ratchet. So yeah, it's solid as hell and that front, and everything else. The soundtrack was fine. You might speak about that, Steve-O. I had no problems with it. It wasn't totally standout, but the cinematography and, like you said, the way it was shot, and that's interesting little trivia about that they kept the cameras on the anyone who was in the scene but not the focus of the scene in order
so they had to be acting.
Yeah, in order to heighten that. So that's pretty cool, and certainly it added something to the film, and I'm giving Style a pretty damn solid 1.
Yeah, actually, I love that story. I didn't know that, but it makes perfect sense. I think the strongest standout point is the believability of this institution that everyone is in, kind of the oppressive nature of it. I love how good it feels every time one of those windows gets opened, or at the end when Chief throws the thing through and runs out the window. That's a build up throughout the entire movie of getting out is such a freeing thing, and that all goes to the direction and how this whole movie is built. In terms of music, I agree, Scott. It wasn't super standout. I thought it was fine, but I didn't notice.
It served its purpose, right?
I actually liked the music.
No, I mean, I'm not saying it sucked or anything. It's just it wasn't.
I liked it too, but I don't remember any of the songs that were in it. I don't remember much about it.
Yeah, it was almost music kind of style, but then again, sort of makes sense, given the nature. I will say just one more highlight for me is similar to what you just mentioned, Steve-O. The basketball scene, I thought, when he gets them playing the basketball game. I thought that was a really well done scene, and the shots and the movement around that was pretty damn solid. Added a lot to the feel of it.
Now I'm going to pull this one from memory. It's part of the article, but I don't remember 100%. So a caveat in there. The director got a lot of unknown people, including Christopher Lloyd and Danny DeVito at this point. And Jack Nicholson was the big name for this. So they actually had all these people come in and work and live at an asylum, to the point when Jack Nicholson showed up right before shooting, he mistook some of the actors for actual patients there.
That's hell of a method acting right there, for sure.
Wow, that's crazy.
But yeah, again, interesting little trivia about it.
That's
but it seemed all these little things added to the feel and the like how good the final product.
The director put in a lot of effort into making this work.
Yeah, for sure, and I think it shows.
Okay, and Scott, we end with you. We end the session with you. Would you recommend this film?
Yes, I would. So I have seen this movie again a while ago, and I didn't remember it all that well. I remembered some stuff, but seeing it almost fairly fresh again, yeah, it's damn solid. I think it's. You said it was 33, I believe, correct on the list.
Yeah.
So what number it is? I think that's a damn good spot for it. Yes, I absolutely would recommend it. It's like we said, it fostered some pretty solid discussion thematically and otherwise, and I think it still stands as a piece of film and still has something to say in terms of the subject matter.
Yeah, I completely agree. I really enjoyed watching this. This is my first viewing of this. It was one of my a wall of shame movies that I hadn't seen yet.
Take it off the wall of shame, baby.
So yeah, I'm glad I finally got to see it, and I'm glad I got to talk about it with you gentlemen. I really enjoyed it, and I would definitely recommend it to anybody who is looking for a really impressive movie experience.
I was on the fence, believe it or not, whether or not to recommend this, because while I love it, and I'm a fan of Milos Forman, it does come down to one of those things where would it be something I would go out and be like, hey, you have to see this, or if somebody said, should I see it, again, setting precedent, and then it comes down to should it be on the AFI, and I
think it should.
But that's
Sure.
my whole point is. I don't know if it's something I'd run out and say like, "Hey, you have to see this." But Scott brings up a good point that it really brought up an in-depth, heated discussion here. Milos, as a piece of work, it is excellent, and it definitely deserves to be on the AFI. So, yeah, I think I'm going to recommend it.
Yes. Okay, that brings us to a
Very nice.
9.75 overall. As your doctor, I'm unfortunately, you're indefinitely detained to this podcast. So I'll see you next time, gentlemen. Dr. Manzer here with Christopher Morgan.
Hit me.
Stephen Ramosi.
Adieu.
And Scott.
We're all mad here. Good night.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.